Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 5 in the home stretch. This week, we're going to be looking at student to content interactions as part of our larger theoretical construct that we've used to sort of construct this course. And when we think about student to content interaction, one of the first things that comes to mind is that idea of accessibility. How can our students get access to the content? So we're going to come down here and spend a little time here in this folder where we're going to be looking at the ideas behind UDL, or the Universal Design for Learning. Most of you, when you think of UDL, see things like Introduction to Screen Readers, sort of get hooked into the idea of thinking about UDL based on the idea of making sure that your content is accessible to your learners that might have some sort of physical disability. But let me tell you something. UDL is actually written in such a way that it's based on high quality learning sciences. And when you create content that's accessible in multiple different ways, you end up creating content that's more meaningful and more accessible and more supportive of learning for all of your learners, even if they don't have the need for something in particular, like a screen reader or some other kind of accommodation based on a physical or learning disability. So when you're reading this week, we take a deep dive here into the UDL guidelines, and you're playing around with the at the WebAIM website. Remember that the time and effort you put into making your content accessible really is about making your content more meaningful and more accessible to all your learners, because as we all know, sometimes we watch a show with screen caption on even if we don't need it, because it helps us focus or it helps us understand a dialect, and all these other kinds of ways that we've learned that this universal idea of accommodation supports all of our learners. So the other thing I want to highlight this week is one of our readings. The very first one here by Pandero and Johnson looks at basically a literature review on some of the research on using rubrics. And you might think, what does evaluating student work have to do with student to content? Well, a well-written rubric, and this research reinforces that a well-written rubric helps our students figure out where and when and how to focus on different parts of the content and how to leverage that in their learning. So one of the big themes that come out of this reading are around the idea of transparency. And then I have to read this. The extrinsically driven performance orientation of our students. In other words, if you set up a hoop and it's a good hoop and a meaningful hoop and they jump through it, better learning happens. So when you're thinking about rubrics, think about ways that you can use them for transparency, letting your students know what you value. Do you want them to make sure if they've read all three of these assignments, for example, and are fluent in all three of them? Well, then you could create a discussion board rubric that could say referencing all three of the required readings and resources. If you'd prefer your learners to become an expert in the one that really interests them, you could make your rubric say something like demonstrating a deep understanding of one of the three essential readings. So you can use rubrics not only to create transparency so your students know what you value and where they should be directing their attention, but also to help our extrinsically driven people. And I'm going to argue that I'm one of those. If you tell me what I need to do, usually to get an A minus, I'm not an A+ student, I'm going to do exactly that. So a well-written rubric, the time and effort you put into writing it and then putting it up into your course shell is really helpful. So before we head out this week, make sure you watch Jerome Bruner. You know, I'm an education person, and so Jerome looms large in my field, so to speak. But his work talks, in this particular 5-minute video, talks about how important it is to think about your teaching, how you present content, when you present content, what you're doing, and how it actually impacts learning. And those rubrics come back there a little bit as well. So before you're done this week, you're going to have done your readings, watched the video, worked on that group project, posted to the wiki, done a quiz, and get that reflection up in VoiceThread. It's a really important part of the learning process. Take care, everybody.